destroy my childhood, ruin my chance at college, and laugh when I said I was homeless? Lol cool, I will ruin your life. Backstory, my mother was a really crappy person. I have 4 other siblings. 1 older sister, 3 way younger, 3 different dads. Before I was born, I'm a male by the way, my oldest sister was taken away from my mother when she was a few months old because she tried to slice the father of my sister while he was holding her. She lost custody and the dude left her. The older sister goes to live with her father's family in a different city. Cue little old me coming into this sexy world. My dad went to jail 2 to 3 years after I was born for a while. I rarely saw him. He's an alcoholic if that matters. She was a single mother, but she made it work, and she worked hard. One of the bigger problems was that she took out all her aggression and hatred of my father on me as well as work stress, etc. She dealt with sexual abuse growing up, which I'm sure definitely affected her relationships and how she treated me as well. Anyways, cue me being abused from the age of 4 to 5 to about 17. Every day was hell. She was extremely strict and her perspective was warped. She was also pretty big in stature and had a lot of strength. Examples of her being crappy. I've gotten beaten up badly once because her room was dirty, the dishes weren't washed, and I got beaten soon as I got home, even if there weren't dishes when I left for school. If I walked too loud, I'd get my butt beat. She broke my nose for looking at her the wrong way on my 10th birthday when she brought me a cake I was allergic to. It had peanuts. She knows I'm slightly allergic but feigned ignorance. It was more or less every day or every other day. She used her fists, elbows, extension cords, hangers, chairs, canes, butts, etc. Whatever she could find I was getting beaten with. I couldn't even escape to my room for long because she would always call me every few minutes to get her things or to yell at me. She never drank or did drugs or anything. Whenever she was upset and I happened to be in front of her, she'd kick me down the stairs to make me hurry up. She's put a knife to my neck before and had to be forcibly stopped by her boyfriend of the time. Burned my Christmas presents from other people. She didn't get me anything that year and just other crappy things. The only thing I will say, she tried hard to make up for it with video games and electronics, etc. It didn't make a difference to me though. It never helped. She controlled most aspects of my life. I got by with little petty acts of revenge. Peeing in the Lipton iced tea she drank. Rubbing her forks and spoons between my butt cheeks before I served her dinner. Ignoring her screams for help when she had kidney stones. How the hell am I supposed to help anyways? But by the time I got to high school I turned to alcohol. I resented her, and the negative atmosphere affected who I was as a person. I started to be cold and uncaring. Calculated. She started kicking me out every few months, telling me to find somewhere else to live by age 15. She sent me away to a different country for a year and tried to keep my passport, but I made it back to the US with the help of the embassy and my stepfather. She'd already left by that time and found some other dude. I came back senior year with no credits for the prior grade, which ended with me getting a general education development. I spent most of the time I could with my best friend and started working in crappy jobs. I was terrible at saving as I had accumulated loads of crappy habits while growing up, so it didn't make much difference. She eventually told me that if I went to college, I would always have a place to live until I finished. Cue my first 2 semesters at a 2-year college. I maintained a 3.7-ish GPA. My teachers loved me, and it was my escape. Towards the end of my 2nd semester during finals, I came home late one night around 10 PM, and my mother yanks the door open screaming in my face asking when I'll move out. I'm slightly drunk and decide to completely ignore her and walk to my room. If I opened my mouth, that day would be the day I blew up and cursed her out. I've rarely ever raised my voice at her because it never ended well. Now at this point, I'm 19 and I've been doing school full time with no savings. I'm also fairly fit and could easily take my mom at this point. Never laid a hand on her or any woman. I hate violence. I get to my room. She rips my door open and starts yelling. I say nothing and stare at her. She walks away and called the police on me, saying she thought I'd murder her and my younger siblings. I don't know where the hell she got that idea from, as she's the one who's nearly killed me many times. I packed everything into a duffel bag and left 5 minutes afterward. I failed all of my finals because I couldn't make it to my school. Things kinda spiraled, and the next 2 to 3 years were me on and off homeless. I survived the best I could in a big city with no college degree and made a lot of crappy choices due to my crappy habits. Eventually, I found a profitable hobby that gave me meaning, and through that, I started to work my way up, got my own apartment, had a full-time job, and did my hobby on the side. I hadn't kept up contact with my mother at all, but my younger sister, who was old enough to have a phone, found me on social media, so I saw photos and such. She didn't have it anywhere near as bad, but she did get beaten occasionally. My mother reached out via email, all smiles, asking how I've been. Now, guys, I've always been envious of the relationship most people have with their moms, so I gave her a chance and gave her a call. We talked for a few minutes and everything was civil and seemed like things would go okay, but then she asked me what I've been up to the last few years, and I told her honestly that I was homeless for a while and struggled a lot after what she did to me, but I worked my way out of it. She literally laughs. She laughed for a few seconds in a very condescending kinda chuckle and then said, "I never did a thing to you, so you don't know what abuse is. It's your own damn fault you were homeless. So how about you?" But by that point, I hung up. I was speechless and fuming. I don't know what abuse is? Okay, which? I have spent too freaking long letting you destroy my sanity. Now is the time. There were a few things my mother didn't know. 1. I knew for a fact that the current well-paying job she had was gotten on lies, as she never got her college degree and lied about it on her resume. 2. I had access to all of her email accounts and cloud storage accounts, since I was the one that set them up when I was younger, and she never changes her passwords. Lastly, she definitely wasn't aware that from 13 years old and on to the last time she hit me, I took photos of all my bruises, marks, wounds, bloody noses, saving them to my computer and then Google Drive. On top of that, my little sister had been sending me photos via social media of the bruises she got from my mom. The first thing I did was compile all of those photos, videos into one folder. I then reached out to CPS in my city and explained that my siblings were being abused, how I was abused in the past, and that I had mountains of proof, since I've called the cops on my mother before. And the thing that happened with my older sister, there was immediately a home visit. They arrived almost a day later with the police, and coincidentally my mother was literally in the process of beating my younger sister when they were knocking. Cue an emergency removal of all my siblings from the house and my mother getting arrested, though she was released hours later. I was getting a day-to-day, play-by-play, because my mother's best friend is a blabbermouth, and everything my mother said she told her son, who relayed it to me without either of their knowledge. I sent CPS all the evidence, and there's a legit case against my mother now. The next day I emailed and then called up her job to inform them that she had lied about having a very necessary college degree as well as current events in her life, which sparked a background check. She was fired days later. Say adios to $75,000 and a blacklist in the only industry you know how to work. I then spitefully deleted every cloud account and email address I have made for her, which was all of them, which I'm sure will make keeping up with a lot of bills, etc. nearly impossible. I then anonymously reported her to the IRS because of the tax fraud she committed for years by claiming people's children that weren't hers with a lot of detailed information, since I lived with her while she did it. So now, my mother lost all her kids and her job. I'm meeting with a caseworker from CPS next week to talk more about what happens moving forward, but I do know they are not going back. I don't know how she's gonna pay her mortgage now and survive. I'm sure she's gonna get a call from the IRS who'll be looking for a few $1,000s she owes them. She also has to go back to court in a few months. Not exactly sure what she was charged with, but I'll update when I find out how everything turns out. Side note, she isn't aware I'm the cause of any of this. I plan on keeping tabs on her and waiting until it seems like she's close to death before I tell her it was all me and I peed in her Lipton. Update 1. I'll give an update on me personally first. My camera was stolen, and instead of trying to get another one, I decided to take a break from photography. I appreciate all of the support you guys gave me after my first post. It's been extremely hard Taking pictures was the only thing I really did that helped me feel okay, but I'm learning to build resilience. In the meantime, I swallowed my pride and moved into a homeless shelter in my city specifically for people with jobs and savings. I'll be able to continue saving while I work on bettering myself as a person. I created an action plan and mapped out all my goals and how I want to achieve them. Up until recently, I wasn't even planning on being alive. Sorry if that's too dark. I honestly always had these thoughts wishing my mother would have finished the job with me and made life easier. But as of late, I'm becoming more and more curious about what I'm capable of if I gave myself the chance. I've been able to visit my younger siblings and have gotten to know my little sister a bit better because of the experience. I feel like a horrible person for admitting I still feel nothing for them or really anyone, but I won't let my feelings get in the way of the promise I made to myself of them. I've also only drank 3 times in the last 4 months compared to every other day in the past, which isn't great, but it's a change. My younger siblings are still with CPS, but I can't go into detail. My mother was supposed to go to a hearing to get them back, but things got complicated. Important. My mother's best friend's son, whom I've known 8 years, does his best to relay all the crap my mother tells her while they talk on the phone all day. Things had gotten worse for her. She hasn't been keeping up with her mortgage payments. Her fiance, my youngest sibling's dad, is no longer her fiance anymore and is trying to file for custody. I heard she was a wreck then went ghost, but it didn't make me feel better. There weren't supposed to be any winners. Honestly, I wasn't even going to update. I initially just wanted to tell someone for once, but one thing changed my mind. Something I was not expecting months after I set this all in motion. A phone call from my mother. In the past, seeing her calls, even after moving out, would set me on edge, but that hasn't been the case lately. It was just another thing that happened. Just another event. Meaningless but at the same time. She always had my number, but never reached out. Even when things first started going to crap, I doubt she even gave me a second thought. But I'm sure you're all curious to know what was said. My mother is gone. A few weeks after my post, the state I'm in brought felony charges up against her. She left the country shortly after and went to her home country in South America. I have no idea how she was even allowed to leave, but they didn't take her passport. She avoided specifics on that part. She mentioned staying with a family friend temporarily and tried to frame it as a short vacation. She didn't even start with a hello. She started the conversation by ordering me to go somewhere quiet before launching into a sob story about how things have been going for her. This is after months of no contact. After laughing at me for being homeless and denying she ever abused me months ago. Just yammering away like it was nothing, but I'll let her talk. It was surreal. I felt so cold just listening to her talk. It was like talking to a stranger. She mentions losing out on so much money and how she doesn't know how all it happened. And then finally she hits the topic du jour. Cue her bringing up my little sister and the night of the emergency removal. She starts complaining about how she misses my little sister and brothers, mentions something about how it messes up tax season, and then she had the audacity to start trying to convince me that I should go talk to the caseworkers for her to back up her claim that she never abused them or me, and I should know that. She said that to me after everything. Of all people, 9 minutes into the conversation, like nothing ever happened. But it wasn't anything new. Of course, I cut her off, but at that point, my mind was already made up. I asked her if she remembered when I used to make iced tea for her all those years. She was a little thrown off but said yes. I paused for a few seconds before slowly telling her in detail about all the ways I sabotaged her Lipton iced tea. She tried to interrupt me once, but I didn't stop talking. I told her about how I'd always put too much sugar and she'd never taste it and keep drinking more, which was why I always insisted. There was just silence on the phone, but I know she was listening. I told her waiting until after dinner when I got home from school to shower so I could rub her spoons between my butt cheeks for maximum damage, and how I'd mix it into her food to mask it. At this point, I'm not even sure she's listening anymore, but I'm still describing specific days I remember doing it, that I know she would remember. She finally loudly interrupts me, screaming at me disgusting evil things. She cursed me the way she used to back in the days when she'd be standing over me with an extension cord beating the skin off of me when I was younger. She's blaming me for ruining her life and how she wishes she had a better child, all without knowing that I directly caused the destruction of her current life, though she's speaking about the past. I just let her waste her breath. She couldn't touch me or my siblings. It only lasted a few seconds. Now I remember spending years daydreaming of all things I'd say to my mother if I had the chance, but I just bottled it up with all my other baggage and kept trying to exist. When she finally shut her mouth, I calmly told her, "Look, Mom, you don't know what abuse is, and honestly, it's your own freaking fault this is all happening to you. Also, my bad for pissing in your iced tea." Then I just hung up the phone and blocked her number. That was the last day I drank. I haven't talked to her since. I'm not sure she's aware, or maybe she is, how bad of an idea it was to leave the country with all this going down, even if it was for a few weeks. At this point, I'm done with her. I don't want an apology. I just want to move forward and be a better person. I know that's hard to believe after everything I just told you, but it's the truth. I try my best to put as much positivity into the world and share it with the people around me as much as possible. I don't know if she knows it was me, but I didn't tell her. I'm sure she can guess though if she tried. Anyways, that's my revenge. It's still actively freaking her life up, but I'm not taking any active part in it. I wish it wasn't like this. I wish I had a real family that loved me and I knew how to love back the right way. I wish I had a real relationship with my mother and none of those things happened. I wish I could have turned out like one of the happy people in the world, but I can spend all day wishing. Update 2. My aunt and I recently reconnected about 2 months ago. Prior to last month, I haven't seen her in years. We met up and had a long conversation about life and everything, and then she admitted that she talks to my mother nearly every day. She had mentioned all the things happening to my mother, but didn't know it was me who started this all. She felt really bad for my mother, but my aunt was always a caring person, so I understand, I guess. I told her I was very uncomfortable with the thought of her talking about me to my mother and asked her not to. My aunt did it anyways. After meeting up with my aunt, I learned through her that my mother was finally coming back to America. She was arriving at the airport in 1 week. The problem was my aunt told her that I was going with her so the three of us could all talk without telling me. I didn't know what the feeling of betrayal really felt like until my aunt told me that. To be honest, as wrong as it sounds, I'd rather my mother just think I died or something our phone call. But my aunt kept insisting that I had to give my mother another chance, and I had to learn to be open-minded, and that though she wasn't there all the times my mom did horrible crap to me, she loved us both and wanted us to get along. Like I'm supposed to just get along with someone who has tried to murder me, like my mother has choked me awake for school. If you don't know what it's like to forcefully wake up not being able to breathe and seeing your own mother standing over you at 5 AM angrily and tightly gripping your throat, count yourself lucky. But, as I said at the beginning of this post, I've already resolved myself to being a bad person, and so I lied to one of the only people who were kind to me, and I promised my aunt I'd try to have a heart-to-heart with my mom and her, and talk out the nearly 20 years of abuse. Obviously, that was not happening. When we got off the phone, I called the detectives who gave me their numbers months back in case I heard from my mother. I asked them a few leading questions about what would happen if so and so were discovered, and then I made my plan. I wasn't sure if my mother would make it past customs. How is she able to travel to a different country with a warrant? I didn't know, but if she did, I'd call the police in the bathroom and wait for them to arrive while I sat with my mother. Cue my mother making it past customs, because she's my mother. She's a horrible person, but she's good at what she does, which is being horrible. I digress. My mother calls my aunt when she's getting off the planes, and my aunt says she's going to meet her. I told my aunt I'd wait for them in the little Starbucks and then we'd all drive somewhere else. My aunt agreed and went off. I called the detective and told him that my mother was standing a few feet away from me, and if they could meet me at our destination we were going to. They told me that was unnecessary and that they'd have officers closer to me come and apprehend her at the airport instead. And so I waited and waited, and then I finally saw them arriving both at the same time. The 3 to 4 officers who had convened in those few passing minutes and actively searching around the food court I sat close to, my mother and my aunt walking down the gate towards me. I felt this overwhelming weight in my chest just kind of settling down deeper and deeper into my gut the closer they got, and the more the officers searched. What if they stopped looking when my mother arrived? What if my mother somehow got away with this crap again? Countless thoughts, but I just bit them back. I've grown very talented at silencing whatever minor turmoil of the day happened to be. But my mother and my aunt were animatedly talking as they made their way to where I was sitting. Before they had a chance to say anything, I quickly jumped up and said I ordered some teas, let me go see if they are ready, which was the first thing I could think of as they were sitting. But it worked, and I dashed off past the cash register to the Starbucks and the outer part of the food court. Looking back, saying I had to go grab some tea probably wasn't the best thing to say, but I digress. I made it a few feet out the door and half jogged over to the officers, who were still looking around the food court area. From where they were, they wouldn't have seen us sitting. I walked over and asked them if they had gotten a call about a woman who had a warrant or something. I mentioned that the detective said officers in or near the airport would arrest her. They said they did, and I told them it was my mother. I told them her first name and they verified her last name. I told them she was sitting right in the Starbucks waiting for jail, and one of the cops chuckled. Seemed a bit surprised and judgy that I was pointing them right to my mom. I told them I'd go make sure she didn't leave, and they followed behind by like 10 to 15 paces. I half jogged back inside and up to the little table where they were sitting. My mother had that half scowl she always wore whenever she looked up at me when I popped up out of nowhere, and my aunt began asking me where the drinks were before I cut her off and looked dead at my mother and her scowling face, which had quickly changed into confusion when I had finished my sentence. Mom, I know we don't get along, but I wanted to let you know it's all my fault. Cue my mother starting to ask me with this kind of soft motherly voice, what do you mean it's your fault? Why do you think? But of course I cut her off, because there's nothing she hates more than being cut off, and I finally have the power in this situation. Look, witch, I want you to know exactly whose fault it is, and whose piss you drank, when you're sitting in jail wondering, why the world did you so wrong? She sputtered something, and slapped the freaking crap out of me. My aunt's jaw dropped. People are watching. The cops saw it happen, as well as only a few seconds had passed from when I walked into handcuffs. She goes. Now she's showing her true colors, cursing and saying all kinds of things you couldn't imagine a mom saying to her kid, telling me she'd kill me, and so on, etc. I calmly walked behind them as long as I could until they took her to some room and held her until the detective arrived. I wasn't there that long though, as the lack of thrill of it all kind of got to me, and I went home to break a 2-month sober streak. I was there long enough for my aunt to tell me she was disappointed in me and that she doesn't know if she can forgive me for doing something so spiteful and disgusting to her sister. To be fair, I did it completely out of spite, so she isn't wrong. I've already acknowledged I'm not a good person for what I did. Come to find out, my mother was using my aunt's passport to leave and come back to the country multiple times since she left. That's why they never caught her. Now my aunt has some explaining to do, but I wish she didn't have to get caught up in all of this. She has always been kind to me and doesn't deserve it. My mother is facing up to 10 years just for using my aunt's passport alone, and a slew of other charges, including one for child endangerment. Her husband left her. Her kids were taken from her. Her friends have seemingly distanced themselves from her from what I know. After 19 years of abuse, I finally get my revenge, and none of the charges have anything to do with me, which is interesting. Did it feel good? No. I felt nothing. Just the rise and fall of the situation, but nothing really concrete. I expected to feel something. Not even satisfaction or happiness, but something. Either way, the only thing for me to do is continue to work towards becoming the person I want to be. She told me constantly that I was worthless and that I'm nothing. I've told myself the same consistently as well in the past. I've decided I'm going to become one of the greatest photographers of my time, and I'm going to push myself as hard as possible to succeed, so that anyone else who has ever suffered how I have now have no reason to doubt themselves or their ability to be great one day. As for me right now, I currently live in a homeless shelter. I decided to go to one 6 months ago after realizing all the drinking and inconsistency was making it hard for me to move forward. I wasn't saving money and was couch hopping from friend's house to friend's house. A few weeks ago I got a voucher from the govt, and sometime in the next 2 months, I can find a 1-bedroom or a studio apartment. I've been aggressively saving my small checks. I've been practicing and working on building better habits and just being a better photographer. I don't make much right now, and I know many people will say it's a stupid dream, but I know if I put all of the efforts into making this work, I can not only be a self-sustaining photographer, but more than that. My situation is embarrassing and it's hard, but I know I won't be here longer than another few months. It's not a dream, it's a plan. I'll also be going back to school in the fall and pursuing photography. As for my siblings, that situation is still a bit dicey, and I don't think I'll give an update about that, but they're all doing very well. As far as my mother is concerned, as horrible as she was towards me, the only part of me that even thinks about her on rare occasions hopes she isn't having a horrible time. I don't like knowing people are hurting,